points, especially when we total everything up at the end of the quarter. Turn in your assignments. I noticed that you didn't turn in your assignments. All right, so extra credit. I always give extra credit points for the evaluations, the iEvals. So when I say to cut and paste that you prove that you did it, I don't want you to put your answers. I just want you to put down the receipt that you get from iEval that says that you did it. I don't know why people get upset every time I tell them to give me proof that they did it. They go, well, I'm not going to show you what I did. So that's fine. But I don't want you to show me your answers. I want you to show me the receipt that you did it, that iEval gives you. So that's coming up soon. So chapter 11, competitive strategy. So any questions about anything before we get started in the chapter? About extra credit, about turning your assignments in, about scheduling a group second meeting. I have a meeting with a couple of groups after class today. So when we end, stick around. Questions, concerns? All right, so let's move on. This chapter is all about competitive strategy, all the things that you need to know when evaluating a competitor. This is something that you're going to be using in your group projects. When we go into a different type of industry, you're going to use these dynamics of competitive strategies to see how you compete or how well you can do against another company in the industry. So a strategic group is a set of companies that compete in similar ways with similar business models, pursuing similar sets of customers. So for example, in this chapter, we're going to use the airlines. So Delta, United, and American Airlines are in the same category, are in the same group. They're full segment airlines, which means they serve dinner, they fly international, they're in major airport hubs, as opposed to Southwest that goes to the outer hubs, ones that are less crowded. And then you have your other segments, which is the discount low fare airlines, which is Southwest, JetBlue, Frontier, Spirit. So they compete in a different realm than what Delta, United, and American. So they kind of okay, I'm getting a notice that my internet is unstable. So if I have an issue, stick around and we will, I will be back shortly. I've been having some internet issues lately. All right, so barriers to mobility in the competitive landscape. So obviously full fares, the cost of using different airplanes, the cost of what it is to be at a hub. So if you're in a major hub and have a larger section of that hub, obviously it's going to cost you a lot more than it's going to cost Southwest that goes into an airport that is out of the way, like Ontario. How that's not a major, even though it's an international airport, it's not a major hub like LAX or San Diego. So those are the kind of things that that differentiate these two groups between full fare groups and low fare groups. Okay, so and usually it's not easy to move between the two. It's hard for Delta, American, and United to cut prices to be able to compete with Southwest and some of the airlines that they do on some of the trips, you know, from like LA to Miami or something of that nature. So they can't just cut their fares and compete automatically with them. So the strategy canvas is a useful tool not only for uncovering existing difference among competitors, but also for identifying new ways to beat rivals. So the more you know about your competition, the more you can compete with them. The better you know them, the better you can find ways around competing. Okay, so in the Southwest, for example, you might be able to identify new opportunities for competitive positioning by studying the difference between how the airlines and cars are competing across relevant purchase criteria. So for short trips, maybe from LA to Portland, you might want to consider driving. You know, it's what, about 14 hours. maybe 12 if you drive real fast. So instead of taking a plane from LAX, which you always go to Seattle first, I don't know why, but they go to Seattle, then Portland. So you would consider, so it'll take 4 or 5 hours to do that trip and maybe $300, as opposed to a car, for driving a car, which would be maybe the payoff would be you spend more time in your car, but the cost is, half or a quarter of what it would cost to fly. And plus, when you get there, you don't have to rent a car. So looking at the strategy canvas, you categorize your companies, and you compare how they compete against each other and how they can compete outside of their area. So we have the 3 tiers here. The big three, United, American, Delta, they're pretty much so big that they're not going to be able to compete with Southwest, Aloha, or Hawaiian Airlines. But they can't compete on price. They can compete on where they go and how they get there. And you can have a nice dinner in first class as opposed to Southwest, where they have no first class. And I think they throw a bag of peanuts at you. I get you peanuts or cookies, one or the other. So that's knowing how your competitors operate gives you a better advantage. So competitor response profile is a profile a competitor that identifies its objectives and assumptions, its strategies, and its resources and capabilities to anticipate how the competitor might respond to rival actions. So what drives the competitor? What the competitor is doing? What is the competitor capable of doing? And that's another thing too. Even though you might not be a direct competitor, if the competitor wants to, like for example, American Airlines, it could drop its prices from LAX to Portland, to Seattle, to kind of monopolize that stretch of area, or that geographical area, and they could actually take business away from Southwest. So Southwest would either have to give up that geographical area or drop its prices to match Delta, which means they're both losing prices. So when you have just a few companies doing that, generally that's not a tactic that they will take. So if Southwest doesn't take a significant market share away from Delta, they probably won't do anything. If Southwest does take a significant market share, then they will react. And like I explained, they'll have to react by dropping prices, giving extra bonus, rewards points for flights, whatever they have to do in order to compete to keep their market share. So most of the time, like I said, most of the time, the large companies are not going to drop their prices so low to compete with some of these, with Southwest. But if they want to take over a certain geographical area, they could do that. Okay. Excuse me. So making a competitor profile, excuse me, you want the objectives, strategy, assumptions, and resource capabilities. So you got to first figure out what drives the competitor. So you figure out the driving force behind the competition, and then what the competitor is doing or is capable of doing. So those are the two biggest things when you're evaluating a competitor. So objectives: deliver the benefit of the international scale for overall cost savings, capture a greater share of the market by providing home city to destination travelers for international travelers. So a lot of people who fly Southwest always say, hey, I wish these guys would fly to Europe and South America, and some of these other countries, but they don't, because Southwest, one, doesn't have the planes to accommodate long trips like that. They don't have the storage area or that's needed for the luggage or for the food. So, but Delta does. So the people who get used to flying Delta sometimes will take Delta for short little trips here in the United States or in other countries, because they like to fly the same airline and they like to get their bonus points and their miles. So that's one of the things that Delta has an advantage sometimes when it comes to short little trips as over Southwest. And you can't really, your mileage points, you can't really go in between the two. So they know that and they capitalize on that. So assumptions: passengers want to fly the same airline domestically and internationally. Scale savings exist by having a global footprint, which permits competing prices on international routes. Position an international travel choice as to many customers as possible by building an extensive network. And then finally, resources and capabilities, locations in major cities. Like I said, the deltas, the cost in major cities is going to be more. Airline partners that provide global reach, fleet of large aircrafts. And Delta has not just one aircraft. They fly several different aircrafts. So obviously their costs are a little bit higher and they can't lower their costs to compete directly with Southwest. So those are some of the advantages and disadvantages. So for principle, identifying potential competitive moves, know your strengths and weaknesses, bring strengths against weaknesses. So for example, flying in major hubs, having a higher cost, that is a weakness, and Southwest brings their strengths of low cost, easy on, easy off. I don't know if you guys have ever flown out of Ontario as opposed to LAX. It's much easier to get in and out of Ontario. The traffic's not as bad. All these things are pluses when it comes to traveling. Protect and neutralize vulnerabilities. Develop strategies that cannot be easily imitated or copied. So for example, the easy on and easy off that Southwest does when it's a turnover, when it's in a hub, it's quick, it's fast. There's very few delays with the airplanes with Southwest. Their mechanics are great when it comes to, servicing the one airplane that they fly, the 737. And, as opposed to some of these other airlines where they don't always have a replacement plane. So if you're flying a big 777 or 787, they don't always have one available to replace all 500 passengers. So you have to split up the passengers. You have to put them on different planes to different locations to get them to where they need to go. So know your strengths and your weaknesses. Resources and capabilities deliver unique value. Weaknesses, resource and capabilities subject to rapid obsolescence, easy imitation or high cost, not recouped by value. So some of the lower cost airlines are trying to copy what Southwest does. So Southwest has to be very, very careful with these competitors. So a careful assessment of strengths and weaknesses from the foundation of the competitive strategy. And I expect you to use this when you're doing your consulting for the final project. Target strengths against competitors, weakness for greater competitive effect. Google, for example, leveraging the software engineering to develop the Android operating system. We talked about Nokia, how they didn't switch their operating system or didn't develop an operating system to compete with these, with Microsoft, with Android, and some of these other companies. So Nokia basically went out of business almost. They're pretty much just barely hanging on in some of the European and Scandinavian countries. They make a great product. I still have a couple of IKEA phones that I used way back when, and they still work. All right. Protect and neutralize vulnerabilities, strengthen or neutralize weaknesses. Starbucks protects its atmosphere by providing, a good atmosphere, a nice atmosphere, comfortable. You can go there, you can get free Wi-Fi. I know over there by UCR, a lot of the students go there in between classes, work on their projects. It's a pretty big space for Starbucks, one of the bigger ones. But they also have, some people think, great coffee, some food items where you can get some food and convenience. And over on the right is a little bit of how the Starbucks logo has progressed over the years. A little bit of trivia, fun facts for you. All right, so any questions about that so far before we get into game theory? So anybody know anything about game theory? Have you guys done game theory before? A little bit? Okay. So game theory is a structured approach to analysis of competitors' interaction that yields predictions about which strategic actions are most likely to be chosen by rivals. So the prisoner's dilemma is the most famous one of the game theory, which pretty much the example that they always use is there's two two prisoners, and if one prisoner rats on the other one, they'll only get 1 year, and if the other one rats on the other one, they'll get a year. But if they both stay silent, or I'm sorry, if they both if they both stay silent, they get 0. And if they both if they both confess, they get 2 years. So, which is kind of it doesn't really explain how businesses use the game theory. So we get into a Nash equilibrium, which is more conducive to way a lot of businesses kind of see how the game theory goes, which is a set of moves in which the game that simultaneously maximize each firm's payoff. So each firm will do whatever is best for them. So evening things out, there's really no even way of doing it. So either one wins, one loses. So no player has an incentive to defect. So they don't have an incentive to give up. Each player wants to move on and move ahead. So a dominant strategy theory is a set of actions that are always played no matter what a rival chooses to do. So no matter what, Walmart always provides the lowest prices, right? So even though they could charge a higher price, they don't. Their dominant strategy is the low price leader. Okay. And then a tit for tat strategy, a strategy that responds in kind to the moves of the rivals. So for example, Coke and Pepsi and the Cola Wars. So Pepsi will give out a coupon 1 week. Coke will give out another coupon the following week. So when Coke's prices go back to normal, Pepsi gives out a coupon, so the sales. And if you look like it, it's kind of it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. So it goes down when the coupons are not in effect, and it goes back up when the coupons are in effect. So for example, in a monopoly, in a strategy, so a market of one firm, one highly dominant firm, it reinforces the monopoly, it raises barriers to entry. So for example, utilities are a prime example of a monopoly. Limited competitive access to scarce resources, innovate and patent, introduce new products frequently, which they really don't. For example, Xerox was a monopoly for many, many years. They had the only copier. Even though they did introduce a few products, they didn't introduce that many new products. Basically, they said, here's a copier, take it or leave it. And that's pretty much the way the utility firms are. When I was in the city of Riverside, the gas company, I told you the story before. It was, yeah, we're the gas company. If you want gas, this is what you're going to have to pay. If you don't like it, too bad. And there's no competition. I can't call another company to get different competition. So the monopoly is basically take it or leave it. If you don't like it, too bad. Oligopoly, a market of few firms, 2 to 5. The cell phone companies are very similar to this. They make moves carefully because rivals will detect their moves and respond accordingly. So they use a tit for tat type of strategy. So if, and the cable companies are the exact same way. I just changed over my internet. So because my 1-year contract expired, so they were going to double my cost. So I had no contract. I went to another company, kept my price lower because they are very competitive. So if I was a new customer, I could get the new price with my cable company or with my internet company. But since I was an existing customer, they're not willing to give you the low price that everybody else offers to get you away from your company. Makes no sense whatsoever. But that's their strategy. It's a tit for tat strategy. Takes most beneficial actions while expecting competition to do the same. And the competition did the same. So that's where we are. So in a perfect competition, in my industry, the copier industry, it's a market with many different firms. Firms are price takers rather than price setters. I can't not set a price for a machine. I have to actually go with what the going rate is going to be. I can offer superior service. I can offer a bunch of different things. But basically, it's a perfect competition. Everybody pursues a low-cost strategy and pursue a differentiation strategy. So I have to set myself apart from my competitors in different ways. And sometimes that can be very, very challenging. All right. So any questions so far? Let's see who's sleeping out there. Shall we do a poll to wake you guys up? Oops, wrong one. All right, we will continue. Yes, we have a question in the chat box, which didn't pull up. Okay, would Amazon be considered a monopoly? Yes and no. Amazon, there's pretty much that nobody competes with Amazon, but as far as retailers go, Walmart is a competitor. All of these different internet companies are competitors, but it's kind of like with retailers, nobody's really a competitor with Walmart. So there's about 10 years ago, there's a company called Office Max, I think it was. One of the office companies. There was three big ones: Office Max, Staples, and Office Depot. And the government said, if that company, because one of them wanted to buy, I can't remember, it was Staples or Office Depot, wanted to buy out Office Max. I think Office Depot did buy them out, but the government was, saying that no, you can't do that. That'll create almost a monopoly. But they made the argument that Amazon is actually a competitor. So you can buy everything that you could buy in the Office Max store on Amazon. And so since it was a competitor, they okayed the sale, so they consolidated it. So now you only have two major ones as opposed to three that were out there. And then they're talking about Staples and Office Depot merging, and they're saying that Amazon is a big enough competitor to where it wouldn't be a monopoly. But in essence, it would be, because Amazon does not have any retail brick and mortar for people to go to. So if you wanted to go physically go to a location, you would only have one location to go to if they did merge. All right, so Samsung is due on the 24th at 11:59 p.m. So we talked about Philips become a leader. How did they become that leader in the international and consumer electronics? They offered a unique value proposition. They differentiate products for different geographical areas. So they made not just the same products for everybody, but they also made specific products for specific geographical regions. They had a very wide variety of electronics, started in light bulbs, added vacuum tubes, X-ray tubes, which you guys probably have no idea what they are. And resources and capabilities. So Philips' strategy was to develop the research and development, to pour a lot of money into that, to stay ahead of the competition with breakthrough technologies. And they also formed national organizations. So each individual, or each Philips had a national organization which could tailor to the different regions and local markets and local design that created manufacturing and sales and service for those. So they had their pulse, they had their fingers on the pulse of what was happening in the major national organizations in the national regions. But what happened was they kind of lost track with the whole global thing. So they couldn't do the economies of scale because they were decentralized so much. So they were manufacturing way too many products that were really different in each region. And in Europe, where the major manufacturing was, the cost was very, very high. Remember, we talked about the French, how you couldn't fire them, their cost, what you had to pay them was regulated by the government, all this other things. So they had to close 100 of their 350 manufacturing plants, which was almost 1/3. Philips was slow to market with worldwide product launches because of the many different facilities that they had to coordinate. They couldn't communicate well enough to do a global rollout. So Philips' structure required agreement among the national organizations before worldwide production launches planned, and they couldn't do that. And so they had the little different Philips logos. All right, so Panasonic overtakes Philips in the consumer electronics after World War II. They were actually able to offer a unique value proposition. They standardized and reliable products offered at low prices. So they basically had the consumer electronics industry. They had the low prices. They had the reliable products, good quality. So their resources and capabilities were they're very efficient at manufacturing. They could do it in a high volume, and they had a centralized organizational structure. So they didn't have a bunch of different offices all over the globe that had to coordinate, or in Philips' case, they didn't coordinate very well. So Samsung overtakes Panasonic. And how did they do that? And their unique value proposition is different depending on the target market. So Samsung would make different products according to their target market. Samsung offers a range of products around the globe, appealing to a full range of customers, from those interested in low-cost products. And, like in the cell phones, they make a cheap cell phone, and they make a cell phone that's like $1,200. So they basically cater to all different types of customers, from those interested in low-cost products, emerging economies, and they can go into different countries where, like South America, where you have to buy your own phone, but most people can't afford a very expensive phone, so they're only $50 to $100. They can basically get the same phone down there for a fraction of the cost of what it costs us. So resources and capabilities began with low-cost manufacturing of components, vertically integrated towards into the manufacturing. So remember the vertical integration where they went into different types of products, different into the value chain. So this required commitment, significant resources, investment, R&D, and technology and newer products. So they invested heavily in digital technologies as the analogs were phased out. So Samsung capitalized on that. They saw what was coming, and they put a lot of money into research and development to go into the digital products. Questions so far before we get into your thumbtack exercise? No questions? You guys know everything? Good. Glad to hear it. All right. So remember we talked about thumbtack. We're going to do a little exercise about thumbtack. What thumbtack doesn't do very well, they're kind of bad structure and leads. They have two different structures that they charge for: a per bid lead, charge you each time you submit a bid, and then an instant match lead, which charges you, even though you don't bid, it'll charge you and bid for you. So they kind of got out of hand on that, and they got quite a few lawsuits on that. So what thumbtack does well? Customer service, or doesn't do well. Customer service is not very helpful. In many cases, the customer service don't know the businesses that well. They don't know how the leads work. So they can't really be that helpful, because what they do is they have the same customer service help everybody from construction to photography. So, you can't be an expert in everything. So too many pros bidding on the same job. Sometimes there'd be a dozen pros or so bidding on the same job. Obviously, that's not very good business. Competitive analysis. I want you to kind of put this to the test with thumbtack when we do our exercise. So this is what I'm going to have you guys do. I'm going to break you up into groups, and you're going to work on this on the sheet like we do on the shared Google sheet. And I'll share a link with you in just a moment. So your group is starting a company to compete with thumbtack. You will need to define your strategic group. You'll ask the questions: what drives a competitor? What is the competitor doing? What is the competitor capable of